The realm. Do you know what the realm is? It's the 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. A story we agreed to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back for another Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon update video. Alright my friends, in this video I will be discussing something else that was said during George R.R. Martin's interview with House of the Dragon's co-creator Ryan Condal. Now, as you all know, we have seen a lot of different updates ever since HBO started developing House of the Dragon. We have known Ryan Condal and Miguel Sapochnik are House of the Dragon showrunners. We also know who a lot of the actors are because not only did HBO announce it, but we have also seen some of them filming scenes on set. We know the first season will release in the following year. And if you've seen my last video, you even know we will see 17 dragons in this new show. Like I said, we have found out a lot of information about House of the Dragon. However, out of all that information, I believe what I am about to discuss in this video is by far the most significant. Now, I am sure there will be some of you who don't agree with me, but all I ask is that you at least hear me out. If you're even slightly interested in House of the Dragon as a Game of Thrones successor show, you should listen to the whole video. If you're someone who still thinks House of the Dragon will suck, you should definitely listen to the whole video because I believe this information gives us a glimpse into its future. Like a lot of you, every once in a while I will find myself worried about this new show. There are some days where I will bet my life that House of the Dragon will be a great show. Then there are other days where I think, uh-oh, I'm not so sure HBO is handling this the right way. They might mess things up again. I have those same feelings like everyone else. Well, I now feel a whole lot better about the success of this show now that I have heard what I am about to show you. I think a lot of us will agree that the most successful shows have amazing writers. Now, there are always exceptions, but if you think back on your favorite shows, I would bet almost all of them had great writing in most of their seasons. Now, think about how Game of Thrones actually unfolded. Even if you loved every single season, you still know there are millions of fans who hated what happened with the show once it no longer followed the author's original writing. HBO needs those millions of fans if they ever want House of the Dragon to reach the same heights as Game of Thrones. Most fans would agree that the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones were some of the best seasons in the history of television. Not only was that when Dan and Dave were following the A Song of Ice and Fire novels, but that was also when George R.R. Martin was helping them write some of the episodes. Some of you might not know this if you're a new fan, but he did write some of the greatest episodes the show had to offer. He actually wrote 1 episode for each of the first 4 seasons. Now, after season 4 ended, George R.R. Martin was no longer writing on Game of Thrones. The very last episode he wrote was The Lion and the Rose, which was Joffrey's wedding. After this, he stopped writing for the show, and he even stopped watching Game of Thrones for a while. He said he left Game of Thrones because he needed all of his focus on finishing The Winds of Winter. Now, I never actually believed that was the only reason because he never stopped working on everything else he had in development. It was as if Game of Thrones was literally the only thing he stopped working on for some reason. Ever since he walked away from Game of Thrones after season 4, he had worked on a dozen different things, although The Winds of Winter was never finished. This has me worried about how active he would be with House of the Dragon. Now, I know it says he is one of the show's co-creators, but it also said that for Game of Thrones, and we all now know he only wrote a handful of episodes before he walked away for good. So, just because George R.R. Martin's name is slapped on House of the Dragon does not actually mean he will be sitting in the writer's room every season, helping guide them along the way. Well, I am no longer as worried as I once was. We now have an official confirmation that George R.R. Martin did write the very first episode of House of the Dragon.
And I went home, and I remember I told my wife this crazy meeting. George wants to hire me for this thing. He's going to tell HBO about it. And I said, because at this point I was a deeply cynical screenwriter, as we all should be. And I said, I'm never going to hear from anybody in this ever again. And I remember the next day, not HBO, my agents called and said, did you have a meeting with George R.R. Martin yesterday? What happened? HBO Business Affairs just called and they made an offer. It was this crazy thing that happened the next day, and then we were off to the races and went out to meet George, and we broke the pilot together, the back of it, and this was 3 years ago now, but the rest is history in the writing.
As a matter of fact, him and Ryan Condal, House of the Dragon's other creator, actually sat down and wrote the episode together. Now this has me very excited because it has been so many years since George R.R. Martin has written an episode for Game of Thrones. Knowing that he is actually helping them with this show is better than any of the other updates I have seen for House of the Dragon. This might even be a big reason why HBO decided to order a full season without even seeing a pilot episode first. This actually doesn't happen very often, especially with a show that has a budget of this size. When all of HBO's other shows were getting made, the first thing they would do is order a pilot episode. Then, if they liked what they saw, they would order a full season. Well, HBO did not do that with House of the Dragon. They decided to order the whole first season instead. And I would bet it's because George R.R. Martin helped write the first episode, something he didn't even do with Game of Thrones. Now, I'm not done yet. This is not the only good news regarding the show's writing. I'm sure some of you have been wondering if Ryan Condal is the right fit for House of the Dragon. Some of you might be wondering if he even knows anything about A Song of Ice and Fire. Well, that answer is yes. It seems like he knows a lot more than the Game of Thrones writers did. David and Dan were fans of A Song of Ice and Fire, whereas it sounds like Ryan is a student of A Song of Ice and Fire. There is a very big difference. I think Ryan also has one big advantage over David and Dan. House of the Dragon already has an ending. George R.R. Martin laid out all the groundwork for House of the Dragon's ending many years ago. Now, I really want you to hear what else Ryan said during the interview because I think it says a lot about who he is as a writer.
You know, we had done a round of development. If you go back, when it was clear that Game of Thrones was ending, that David and Dan wanted to end it after 7 seasons or something, HBO started looking to develop other shows. And the 2 that I pitched were Dance of the Dragon, which became House of the Dragon, and the Dunk and Egg thing. But there were a number of other shows that were developed at that time, most of them put together by writers that HBO hired who had never read my books and who I guess had watched the show and they were doing. And when we were getting into this, I didn't want that anymore. Obviously, none of those shows ultimately got on the air. I thought, you know, I want people, if they're going to be working in my world, I want them to actually have read my books. And I liked Ryan's work, and I knew he knew the world. He had read the books. So once again, in that bar at the Four Seasons, was where it all started there.
Tell me about how you guys met a little bit, because I think our audience would actually really enjoy this.
I'm a super fan, and I found the books at this point over 20 years ago, and I loved them. I was a huge Tolkien fan. Lord of the Rings, just worshipped at the altar of it. The movies were coming out, and I had just reread them, and I was in this kind of fantasy mode, and I was like, what else is out there? And a friend had recommended, hey, if you love Tolkien, you should really check this out, because it's really the only thing since Tolkien that really got me up out of my seat fantasy-wise. I've liked other fantasies. I've enjoyed things. There's some great classic books out there, but nothing to me held a candle to Tolkien. But this did, and it was, of course, the first book, Game of Thrones. And I read it, and I fell all the way in. I was all in. I couldn't believe how good it was. I read all 3. There were 3 books at the time. Storm of Swords had just been published, and I just devoured them, and then went back and devoured them again, and it became my favorite thing. So and this happened at a time where I was learning to write myself. I was very interested in screenwriting. I'd written a couple of scripts. I was starting to try to make a career of this. I was in my early 20s, and cut to a number of years later, I've now broken in. I still love these books. I'm a huge fan of the television show. I'm watching it all. At some point I tried to get my agents to get me a staff writer job on the show, and they were like, they don't have staff writers. It's just the 2 of them write the whole show. So I respected him so much and actually learned so much from him as a writer, because I credit, even though the books are prose books, George started as a dramatic writer, a screenwriter in television. So the books are written in this, Dave, you've read them. They're written in this incredibly cinematic way with hooks at the end of chapters. There's dialogue. I mean, you could very easily just put slug lines into those books and create scenes out of them. It's not a novelistic style of writing. So I learned a lot about character and storytelling and atmosphere and theme and all these, literary tools like foreshadowing and how to write prophecy, compelling prophecy that doesn't seem dinky or foregone conclusion, all these things that I still use today that I learned from those books. So it was just really exciting for me to be able to meet George, and then we hit it off, and then, you know, on down the road we go, you know, 5, 6, 7 years later, it turned into a job offer, which still, I mean, it still blows my mind that I'm sitting here doing this show.
Now, maybe it's only me, but it really does sound like Ryan will be focusing on the things that many fans saw as David and Dan's weaknesses. I mean, they basically admitted to leaving certain aspects out of the show. I'm sure some of you remember the interview where David Benioff said, "Themes are for 8th grade book reports." This angered a lot of fans, and for good reason. I'm sure some of you also remember what David and Dan said after Game of Thrones ended. They said they didn't want to focus on any of the fantasy elements as much because they wanted a wider fan base. I don't see these as their only weaknesses either. I know I'm not the only one who is angry with the way David and Dan handled the fantasy elements, the magic, and even the prophecies in the show. This greatly affected the Faceless Men, the Lord of Light, the Night King, Azor Ahai, the Valonqar, the Dragon Has 3 Heads, and so many other amazing aspects of A Song of Ice and Fire. After Season 4 of Game of Thrones, when David and Dan were no longer following the books, they basically abandoned all of that. So what does that mean for House of the Dragon? Well, if you listen to what Ryan Condal said during his interview with George R.R. Martin, not only does it sound like he is interested in those things, but it also sounds like they will be a focus of his as well. I don't think Ryan will leave any of those aspects out of House of the Dragon. This is why I think he is a better writer than David and Dan. And this is why I think he is a student of A Song of Ice and Fire, whereas David and Dan were only fans. It doesn't matter how amazing your show looks and sounds if the writing sucks. Game of Thrones Season 8 was incredible in every single way except for the writing, and that's why many fans see that final season as a failure. I believe this is our most significant update regarding House of the Dragon because I think this will have a greater effect on the show over any other area we have seen so far. We unfortunately had to learn that the hard way with Game of Thrones. I honestly do not see that happening with House of the Dragon. After hearing this interview, I feel like the show is now in good hands, and let us not forget, Ryan Condal isn't the only showrunner. Miguel Sapochnik is there as well, who we all know as the director from some of Game of Thrones' greatest episodes like Hardhome, Battle of the Bastards, and The Winds of Winter. I don't know about all of you, but I feel a lot better knowing George R.R. Martin was a writer for the first episode, and knowing someone like Ryan is there to manage all of the other episodes after that. I just hope he doesn't let us down. Now, if you're someone who is waiting for my next episode of Game of Thrones Season 9, I will be releasing that video next. There was so much new House of the Dragon information, I had to get out some of these videos first. Now I want to finish my version of Season 9 so I can start working on a lot of other things. I hope I will see all of you back here for that video. As always, thank you all so much for watching this one. Have a great day, everyone. I will see you soon. Bye.